Timothy J. Wesselowski. I don't have a middle name. The J stood for Grandpa Julius. I was born in Concordia, Kansas. I was born in a Catholic hospital. The building's still there. My dad owned a hatchery, hatched chickens. But after he died, mainly Mom helped him with the hatchery. But Mom she had gone through Emporia and got a teaching degree back in the old days, but it wasn't any good. She had to get updated. So she enrolled at Kansas State, taking classes. And that was when I was in college. And so Dan and me and Walt and Mom, we lived in the Mary Students Apartments. Well, there were two grade schools. I went to field school, one on the west side. Rogers School was on the east. And most of the rich kids were over on the east side. My school was mainly country kids. My favorite one was what we would call pushing the chocolates. Yeah, my dad owned a hatchery, and these chickens were in this little deal that had so the poop could drop through onto this pan, and my job was to go down and scrape the manure off that pan, sprinkle some lye on them, and stick back in there, and we called that pushing the chocolate. Every time we had a hatchery, the poor little boy roosters, nobody wanted them. Everyone wanted the laying hens, so we had to drown a bunch of baby chicks. And the way we do it, we put them in a bucket, and then fill a bucket up with baby chickens, and then pour water into it. Well, and then we take them out to the dump, and the dump was crawling with rats. I mean, there were rats all over. And those rats knew when I was pulling in there with those dead baby chickens that they were going to get a feast. And so I would not even try to touch the ground because the rats are just all around that pig. So I'd get out of the cab and jump into the bed, and I'd just start dumping those damn baby chickens out. Those rats are just swarming all over. That was a fun deal. Well, yeah, no, I that and pushing the chocolates, yeah. I'd drown those chickens and take them to the dump, And the rats knew that pickup on site, and they knew they were going to get fed a bunch of dead baby chickens.
Did you have any fun as a kid?
I wouldn't even touch the ground. I'd jump out of the cab of that pickup and jump back into the bed without even touching the ground because the rats are just swarming all around them. And then I'd throw the chickens out as far as I could and get the rats away from the pickup so I could go back to town.
You know how sometimes parents will be like, "Oh, you did this. I had to walk up the hill both ways." Like when you say that, it's true.
Yeah, that's right. I busted my front tooth walking up a hill on ice. Yep. Well, the main job I had was working at a filling station, and I also did a lot of farm work like plowing and baling hay and stuff like that, which really kind of I think screwed me up because I got this asthma from breathing wheat dust and stuff like that. The wheat dust is really nasty.
Yeah, I see.
And I went down to Oklahoma with the harvest crew, and that only place we were. But I remember that I'd be working in these bins while the wheat's be coming in there, and I was breathing all that wheat dust, and I'd just be coughing all night long. And so as soon as we got back to Blood, I quit, because I didn't want to do any of that crap. So I spent the rest of the summer going out and working hay fields, and that hay didn't bother me, but that wheat dust is nasty. Well, usually it was going out when they were baling hay, and getting the bales of hay and stacking them in the barn or someplace. But then they started having big old round bales, and nobody could pick those up. And they had tractor fork with a fork on it. Yeah. One night I was out with a buddy, and I was staying at his house. And we went out and got drunk that night, and next morning my mom called the house, and this guy that I always worked for when he put up hay called up, and he's going to bale. Oh, he was baling hay. We were storing it in the hay mow of his barn. I was up there on a hot day, and
That's kind of hungover. I mean, I sweated out like you would not believe. You kind of got rid of my hangover. Yeah. Guys up there were sitting there. Damn sweat smelled like a brewery.
By the way, I worked at the 8th of Mill, Texaco, in high school, yeah. 50 cents an hour. Well, I don't know, maybe it was $1 an hour. It wasn't bad then. Yeah, you could buy a lot of, you could buy 4 packs of cigarettes at $1. And the guy that owned that place was just almost like a second father to me, old Paul Schmidt. He's just a good guy, My mom never approved of it because he's Catholic, but that's all right. And for years, after that, if I needed new tires, I'd go to Blake because Paul Smith would tell them to me the cost. Growing up, I was always afraid of him, though, because he had a mustache and a big German Shepherd dog rode around with him. He owned Texaco, so he called his German Shepherd's name was Tex. And he had Tex trained to do all kinds of stuff. His wife worked in the bank, and so when he'd take the money down to the bank, it was in this, this deal that they take money in, and he'd give Tex that money. He said, "Now take that over and put it in the bank." So Tex would go across the street. He'd wait till somebody opened the door so he could get into the bank. He'd go over to Paul's wife's window, and he'd land up, and she'd take the money, put her receipt in it, and then Tex would take it back out. And then Paul would take and treat Tex to ice cream at the drugstore across the street, and they'd go in there and Tex would eat his ice cream and sitting in the booth in the drugstore. But he was my favorite boss ever, and he's only paying me, I think, 50 cents an hour, $1 an hour, like for years and years and years. Every time I need tires, I can go up there and he sell them to me. Matter of fact, I took very early retirement. I was only 55 when I retired. I was working, At that time, they wanted us old teachers were getting paid a lot more because of our experience, and they wanted to get rid of us so they could hire cheaper people. So hell, they just loved to have us retire. My first car was a 1940 Plymouth. Well, they don't make Plymouths anymore. I bought it when I was a junior in high school. I drove it for quite a while. It only cost $65. I dickered with him. The dealership was having an auction to sell all their used cars, and so I heard the guys talking about what they'd pay for that car, and so I went and found a salesman. I said, "I'll give you $65 for that Plymouth." He sold it to me, and I drove it for a long time. I finally crapped out on me when I was college here. Well, I tell you what, I bought my first beer in a pool hall up there in Beloit when I was 15 years old. I was in there shooting pool. I said, "I want to sell me a beer." I went up and ordered a draw for 10 cents, and they gave me one. Boy, it's a wide open town, man. There used to be more damn beer joints in that town, but now they're all gone. We actually had to deal with the cops, I think, because Geneva, I forget what her last name was, it ran the Rainbow Tavern. We're sitting in there drinking beer, and she says, "You guys better go out the back door because we're going to be raided." And about 15 minutes later, here come the cops. They'd warned her. I know. I was competing in football in the fall and track in the spring, but I didn't do anything in the winter. That's when they go down to the pool all right after go down to Rainbow Tavern right after school. Set up a bar, order us. First time I was ever drunk, they used to sell beer in quart bottles up there. And I was in there playing pool one day, and I decided I'd see if they'd sell me a beer, So then I figured well, okay. And hell, at that time you're supposed to be 18. Now you got to be 21 to buy a beer. But hell, I know.
Both times we weren't supposed to be 15.
Yeah. I think the first time I was drunk when I was 15 years old. Went and bought a quart of beer and went out back in the alley and drank it and staggered
just drank the quart of beer.
Because it was cool. I'm not proud of my past.
Yeah.
I'm not hiding from it either. She's a little fireball. Just had lots of energy, and we went up there a lot. But my cousin Gene, I used to hunt up there a lot. I'd hunt rabbits on the farm, and my grandma didn't like Gene all that well. His name was Adolph Eugene. He and I are the same age. Gene and I go out and hunt rabbits at the Byers farm. We go up there. We hunted together and did all kinds of stuff together, when we were growing up. hunt rabbits out on the farm. We had all kinds of places we'd hunt, you know. I did when I was in college. We went out and shot rabbits and brought them in and skinned them in the dorm bathroom and fried them up in electric. Boys, prissy boys, hey, how we do it in the dorm room? We'd skin them in the bathroom. So we're in there skinning them and gutting them, and you know. The hell, it fried up. It tastes like chicken, really. It's kind of like living off the land, you know. My granddad Byers would never pass up hitchhikers. He'd pick up hitchhikers anywhere. He took me out to Hoxie. When I came to Mac College, I came home with some guys from Concordia, and I was living in a rooming house out in Hoxie, way out in western Kansas, and I came home for the weekend, and there was a letter from the coach at Mac College that wanted to talk to me. And Mom had a nervous breakdown after Dad died, and she was someplace, I don't know where the hell she was. That was not for me, I don't need to know. His granddad Byers took care of that. So I came down to college, and I said, well, you know, Sid signed me up. He says, he took me out there, and I mean, he raced me into it so fast, you know, grabbed me, and we went out to the office, and he said, here, sign here, and I signed, and I was in college. But I said, my car's out in Hoxie. He said, well, you'll have to wait till the weekend to go get it. So I went up to go Mom's car back at the Blood, and Granddad took Walt and I out to Hoxie to get my clothes and stuff out of the little rooming house I was living in. And I drove my own Plymouth back. It was a 1940 Plymouth. I drove back, came back to Beloit, picked up my clothes and stuff, and went back down to McPherson. I was in college. Put a lot of thought into that deal.
Yes.
I found a college that would take me with my bad grades.
Yeah.
I don't think Mac College would have admitted me today. They've got higher standards than that now, but I did graduate college with a B- average, which is pretty damn good for me. My mom was very proud of me. Grades in high school were terrible.
But I was such a bad student in high school, good God. Back then, they had a deal where if you graduated from high school, belonged to this North Central Association, they had to take you. So, but when I got into college out here at Mac College, and Mac College wasn't really all that easy. Almost all my professors at Mac College had degrees from, you know, most of them had doctors from like KU or Oklahoma or, you know, someplace like that. My grades were so bad in high school. The superintendent of school was principal of the high school when I was going through. And he met Walt in the hallway up there one day, my brother Walt. And he said, what's Tim doing now? Walt said he's teaching out in Brewster, Kansas. He walked down the hall, come back and said, what'd you say he was doing? He couldn't believe it. But basically, my grades in high school was damn bad because I just didn't care. I was there to play football and throw the shot put. What the hell they make me go to classes for? Now, Tom was just the opposite. He graduated 3.5 years with a degree in petroleum geology.
And we never ate out of restaurants, you know. It was a real treat if we did. Mm-hmm. I know that when Tom went to K-State, sometimes we'd go down to a football game, and we'd stop in Riley, Kansas, and eat, you know. And that was so cool, getting to eat in a restaurant, because we just didn't do it at home. Except my dad had a stroke, and so he's paralyzed on his left side, but he could walk with a brace on the leg here and one of those little hand crutches that hooked onto his, you know, and he just kind of dragged that foot along. But if I had a good game, he'd get my ass up at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is getting up early for a kid at that time. Yeah. And we'd go down to the restaurant for breakfast. Oh, yeah. Because he wanted to hear people brag about me. See, my two older brothers were both linemen, but I was a fullback, so. And he's been a fullback in high school at Jewel, Kansas. Oh, yeah. I really remember the ones we took. You know, we went to Colorado once, we went down to Arkansas once, but they were so rare that you really remembered them, you know, because here I took vacations every year, you know. When I was growing up, I really don't remember a hell of a lot. I remember we went to horse races. My dad liked horse races. We didn't take a whole lot of vacations. One year we went down to Lafayette, Louisiana, cause in the wintertime, because Tom was living there. And they stopped through and picked me up, and we all went to Lafayette, Louisiana. Remember that? I just don't remember all the vacations. We didn't go on vacations every year for sure. I remember we went out to Colorado and Dad went to horse races out there. Yeah. Dragon Mane. You go down and just, well, in big towns, they went back and forth. They used to do that here in McPherson too. Tony like to do it. You go back and forth in Maine. All the kids would go down Main Street on Monday, Sunday, Saturday night. They don't do that anymore, but it used to be. And they'd meet their friends down there, and they'd all hang out on Main Street, and they'd get in their cars and drive up and down. Except Beloit, the Main Street was too damn short to drag it, so we went around and around.
Oh, okay.
We went about 1 block on Main Street, went north on, I forget what the name of that street, clear up to 8th Street, and then come back down Mill Street. Oh, Phil Lane, I tell you, he and I never worked with anybody that I was more compatible with than Phil Lane. And he always had, he's really, matter of fact, Mike Henson wrote down Laneisms, stuff that Lane would say, you know, that he never heard before. He'd say, them boys hung in there like a sick puppy to a warm brick. That was the one I remember the most. Hung in there like a sick puppy to a warm brick. Oh, Phil. Mike Henson wrote down all these Laneisms. He wrote a book about Laneisms. And Phil was always coming up ones I hadn't heard before, too. You know, yeah, he's my favorite guy that I ever worked with. We had those short, fat kids on the football team. We called them ocean toads. And they took pride in being ocean toads. I don't want Phil Lane's ocean toad. An ocean toad is just bigger than a regular toad, and it's fat, you know. Oh, Phil Lane, God. My Aunt Irene, who was my mom's sister, she lived in Randall. And actually, I went to a family reunion, and her first husband died. We call it him illness. He died in about 1950 somewhere, and I remember his funeral. And he was my favorite damned uncle. I mean, he would let me do anything. He had a 49 Ford with an automatic transmission. He took me out to the cow pasture and let me drive it around.
How old were you?
I don't know, 10, maybe 10 years old. I loved him. He's a great guy. Adolph is my uncle who's buried up in Cow Cemetery, at the Jewel Cemetery. Adolph Eugene, that's his son. He's buried in the Leavenworth National Cemetery. I went to his funeral. Walt and I did, but we couldn't go up to the cemetery because it was on it's a military cemetery. He was actually over in Germany, and not during, it wasn't any war or anything, but and he was a Mason. A Mason funeral is amazing. I mean, all of a sudden, and out of the side door, but the casket was up almost on a stage in the front, and it was open, and then a door to the side comes up, and here's all these Masons come out and lay a rose on the casket. But he's really big on that Mason. But he was tough. I mean, I was playing football. He died in January, and he came to all my football games. And Tom said one time he's up there with him, and he said he stood there on the sideline and watched the whole game. And he had to have a brace in his leg, you know, so he could even stand. But he was tough, but, you know, no, he's pretty serious. He got really emotional towards the end. You know, I never seen him cry. He'd cry and stuff like that. I came home late one night, and it was on a Saturday, and I pulled in the driveway, and the ambulance was there, and I knew right away that he was dead, you know. Before I didn't have to go in the house to know he's dead, because he'd been paralyzed, and they had to move his bed downstairs, you know, in the old dining room. We still could eat in the kitchen, but as a matter of fact, I even helped him carry him out of the house. But it didn't hit me until the next morning, really. I fully expected it. We had this friend, Harry Gates, who was a barber, and Harry was into horses, and Dad was into horses, and Harry was Harry never married, but they were good friends. And I went up Sunday morning at the funeral home, and then they had the body shown in the casket and all that stuff. And the first name on the guest list that came to visit was Harry Gates, and I thought, that hit me. Oh, quite. I remember we used to go up there for Sunday dinner about every Sunday. Grandma was a good cook, boy. We'd have fried chicken and roast beef and you name it. It was a spread, and there was a big old long table. My mom, Walt's got it now. My mom had it for years, and I don't know how many damn leases were in that thing, but that damn thing would stretch out. So where one end of the dining room to the other, and they used to have big family dinners up there. God, them old folks knew how to cook. My grandma Wesselowski was just Myrtle was just, she was a good old gal. But she married Dr. Julius Wesselowski. Married her. I swear to God, they lived in the smallest house in Jewel, Kansas. The place was tiny. It's not there anymore, but it was just tiny. You'd think a doctor would make more money. But he had been a doctor long before he came to Jewel. He'd been down in Oklahoma, and he immigrated into New York from Hamburg, Germany. But he died before I was born. The only one of us that he had ever seen him was Tom. He'd seen Tom, but and I was the third born. So, but we liked Grandma. Grandma Wesselowski was a nice old fat lady. Well, I'd sometimes we had. I remember a time or two where Gina and I went down. We stayed overnight at her house. She didn't have much money, but she was totally different from my grandma Byers. My grandma Byers was kind of a hard-nosed, well, not hard-nosed, but much more practical than Wesselowski. He's like my granddad Byers was, it was all business with him, Like, I was in college, and he had this old 48 Plymouth, and he bought a new car, and I threw the rods out of my Plymouth, and Grandma said, well, you can give Tim the Plymouth, you got your new car. And he said, well, I might sell it to him. And she said, you're not going to charge your grandsons in college, She got really mad. She talked about trying to sell me that car. I was 48 Plymouth, 18 years old. Mom wound up with the Chevrolet they bought because after he died, let's see. I know I was in college, and it was just before Christmas because I came home from college, and I was going to go up to the hospital and see him. He's in the hospital at Beloit. And when I got up there, he's dead, but they hadn't even taken him out of the room yet, And of course, he had moved to town. They just bugged the hell out of him to get off that farm, because Grandma was worried that they lived far enough out of town that they could get snowed in out there or whatever, And I think he still would have been better off if he just stayed out there. He wasn't doing much farming. He was still puttering around, So, yeah, it was my freshman year in college. I came home for Christmas, and first thing I did was go up to the hospital to see him, and he died that morning. But Granddad was just a real hard-nosed, practical guy, just like he wanted to charge me for his car, He thought it was silly that I was stupid. I was playing football. He came down. Mom and Grandma came down. We were playing Kansas Wesleyan in Salina, and Mom and Grandma came into the game, and he sat in the car and read the newspaper. He didn't watch the game. I'll bet he thought, stupid. I was down there playing football in college. Well, they came down to watch me play in high school, and Grandma wrote it up in the newspaper like it was the biggest deal she'd ever seen, And she had this little column in the newspaper about the people out in her area, her little township out there, It'd be like so-and-so had Sunday dinner with so-and-so. And good time was had by all, It was like... I don't know, probably Christmas. Clothes got presents. My most memorable one was a bicycle. And the reason was that I wanted a bicycle. I can't remember what birthday it was, 10 years older yet. And Dad was in the hospital. And I just was convinced that I wasn't going to get a bicycle because Dad was in the hospital for it, And Christmas morning, there's this bicycle looked like a brand new bicycle. And I found out years later that it was a used bicycle that my Uncle Adolph and Jewel had painted. And really done a great paint job on it. And so that was that. I think the Christmas present I got that I loved it. I rode that bicycle for years. I stripped it down, took the fenders off of it and all the other good stuff so it'd make it go faster. But yeah, that was my favorite. When I was a kid, we played rough and rowdy game. I'll tell you one time I was riding down we had these pretty steep hills going up to the house, and I had Walt sitting on the handlebars of my bicycle, and I was going full blast down that hill, probably doing close to 15 miles an hour. Walt got his foot caught in the spokes, just collapsed the foot and stuff. Wrecked my bicycle. But my favorite Halloween memory was out in Brewster, Kansas. The kids used to, the small town kids really ransack stuff on it. I was a teacher, and I lived out on this farm, and I think they had colluded with my landlord. A bunch of these kids, they want to come out and trash the farm a little bit. So my landlord wanted me to go down with him someplace, do something, Came back, and that damn house looked like a tornado hit it. There was a stock tank, a big stock tank with a water cat on the end, went to run the roof, and all the windows were soaked. And then another Halloween, what I thought was funny was there was these kids down in Kingman were so polite that they came up and knocked on the door and asked them minded if they soaped the windows on my old car. I said no. If you could come back and wash them off the next morning. And so the next morning they would have to wash the windows off my car. Tanya got caught by the cops. Her friend Shirlene were over soaping the windows at the junior high, and they could only reach the bottom windows, But so when the cops caught them, and they told her who they were, they busted out laughing. They thought it was hilarious. And so I remember the next morning, there's Shirlene and Tanya were washing those windows. And then Tanya, we went up to Mom's house, and Tanya started worrying about what Mr. Young, the principal, was going to do when he found out about that. So, and he hadn't heard about it at all. But he goes over and apologized to Vern Young for soaping the windows, and that's the first he ever heard of it. We were up at Beloit, and I said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when Vern Young finds out about that? And she just worried the heck hell about that. And then she goes over and apologized, and he didn't even know she'd done it. Vern got a kick out of that. Vern didn't have much of a sense of humor. He was an old stern. He's an old stern disciplinarian type principal. Her and her friend Shirlene got in a lot of trouble. Shirlene used to live right over there. But she was always, she would come down here she was in her 80s, she'd drive down here and come to a football game sometime. Well, came up to a game we had in Salina, and it was a big game. We definitely upset a better team that night. And so I look across the field, and here she comes walking across the field. And she didn't like to sit with the McPherson people because she didn't like the people McPherson grabbing up about my coaching. And she had a big sack of chocolate chip cookies. So I passed them out to the kids on the bus, Oh, yeah. How about a grandma's chocolate chip cookie? And she cooked everything from scratch, But we used to go when I was really young, we used to go up to Jewel almost every Sunday for Sunday dinner. After church, we'd take off and go to Jewel. And she had this great big old long table. So everybody could sit around. Walt's got that now. He's got that out. I didn't have room for it. I didn't even want it. But as a matter of fact, Walt refinished it. Walt was very good. He was a carpenter and all that stuff. And he's very meticulous. When I was in high school, we used to play Superior, Nebraska in football. We were ass kickers. I played on an undefeated team in high school. And then as my senior year, I think we all lost one. Yeah, my mom was a little strict, but we just ignored her and went on. I remember that she was living in a nursing home up in Beloit. She died in that nursing home, actually. But we were all gonna meet up there to celebrate her 90th birthday. And she died 3 days short of her 90th birthday, so we're all up there to funeral instead of going up to celebrate her birthday with her. But Tom and I traded off weekends. I didn't go up to Beloit every weekend. It's 100 miles away. But Tom went up every week because he took care of her books and paid her bills, and we kept her house until after she died. And but every other weekend I was trading off with Walt. Walt would go one week, I'd go the next, and we'd drive the bullet 100 miles up there, eat with her. We never wanted to eat at the damn nursing home, but she always wanted us to. So if Walt and I are up there together, we'd go out to the Dairy Queen, eat a hamburger, you know. Gosh. I was one of the first years that they had driver education. I had already learned, you know, but yeah, they had driver's education, and that's that's how I was able to get a license. I had to pass driver's ed, you know, first permit. And now I'll tell you about my wild ride. My dad had a Pontiac, a big engine in it, and that sucker would run. And I was out chasing some girls from Glasgow, Kansas, and we got up about 80 miles an hour, and I saw some headlights in the rearview mirror, but I just decided to blow right by them. So I get up to 120 miles an hour, and this light comes on.
Oh yeah.
And it was a highway patrolman. As a matter of fact, his son was a buddy of mine, and so I had to go down to the courthouse. Now, I know that they had something planned, because there's no way in hell I'd get by with a $20 fine on 120 mile or 110 mile hour, you know. And I remember the judge, and so he said, Tim, this is not a punishment. It's a reminder. Track and field. But I think I really like track and field because Tom and I used to do it together. You know, we'd go to master track meets together, and we got it kind of. Hell, we went twice. Went down to Atlanta, Georgia to compete in track, masters track. Really, later on, I really enjoyed going to masters track meets with my older brother Tom. We actually went to Atlanta, Georgia twice. We went to a national masters meet in Long Island, New York. Is that impressive? I always finished at least in the top three in the shot put. That doesn't mean I was the third best shot putter in the country. My age is, I was the third best of the guys that showed up there. I won some. You know, the thing with Tom too, he was, I was always getting him into this stuff. Because I told him one time, I said, hey, you know, there's a Masters track meet down in Derby. And the first Masters I got into was, I was sitting in the stands at a summer meet in Wichita, and they announced they're having a Masters shot put. So I mosey on down there. I said, can anybody get in this? Yeah, oh yeah, okay. Well, we don't really have a shot put. We got a 16-pound hammer, you know, that only we just screwed the handle off of it. So that's what we threw. And I won it. Won a great big medal. So then I told Tommy about that. And I said, Tom, there's a Masters track meet in Derby, Kansas. And I said, why don't you come on out? So he come out and decided to watch it. So he thought that looked like fun. So the next thing I know, he gets into it bigger than I do because he's going to national meets. You know, he and I did go to New York City together to compete. And these guys, some of those guys have been on the national circuit, couldn't believe that we just kind of wandered in from Kansas and were doing so well. I threw discus against Al Order. Al Order was a 4-time Olympic champion in the discus.
How'd you do against him?
Well, I finished second, but he only beat me by about 100 feet. But, you know, Tony said one time, what are you going to do? You show up at some track meet and Al Order shows up. I said, I'm going to go get in line with him and have somebody take my picture, which I did. Tom and I really got really close later on because we had a lot of the same interests. We both were competing in Masters track meets as shot putters, and we both got into weightlifting, powerlifting. I never will forget that I pulled a 500-pound deadlift up in Concordia, Kansas at a powerlifting meet, and I didn't try to go any higher. And Tom never understood that. Why wouldn't you want to go see how much absolute? I said, hell, I got up to 500 pounds and never injured myself. I wouldn't go. And he took his up to like 518 pounds. We were up to Lincoln, Nebraska, They had an indoor masters track meet up there, Nebraska Wesleyan University. Was that there or someplace else? Oh, anyway, we were at a national meet, but I think it was up in Lincoln, Nebraska. They had a national master track meet, which was just mainly people around Lincoln, Nebraska, and Kansas, the close end. Actually, we got married. Well, Joan graduated a semester, but I still had a semester to go after we got married. And she got a job teaching a country school half-time. We lived in Hall Galen, boy. Even half a teacher's salary looked good to college students. We lived in college apartments that cost us $35 a month to rent. And we had a whole row, there were 4 apartments in this row. And we were all friends. This guy's name was Royce Rush, and I'd say, "Good night, Royce." He said, "Good night, Tim."
Okay.
Walls are so damn thin in that room that you can hear whatever's going on. I went a long ways to get Jean. See that house right over there across the street? That's where she lived.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Real effort there.
Well, I had no idea, that.
All that time.
But after I got divorced, she was divorced, and then one time I was kind of trying to figure out how to approach her, and up in Dillon's, I met her coming out of Dillon's, and I spoke to her, and she got this deer in the headlight look. Just walked right past me. I thought, "Well, you snob." So then a day later, she drives by my house and waves at me. I'm out mowing the lawn.
Wait, she does what?
Yeah, she drove by the house and waved at me. Am I getting mixed messages here? Oh, Lord.
Well, I think it ended up okay.
Yeah.